Tunnel versus warehouse. Mountain versus sea. The rematch. Who wins this time? Find out as we put the first two Sakurao Distillery core range releases head to head on Kanpai Planet. On the 1st of July 2021, the Sakurao Distillery released their first single malts. First release cask strength Togouchi and the eponymous Sakurao. Both whiskies were distilled in the same place, the Sakurao Distillery in Hatsukaichi, Hiroshima, but Sakurao is aged in a warehouse on site at the distillery, smack on sea level, while Togouchi is aged in an old railway tunnel in the mountains around Hiroshima, in an area called, you guessed it, Togouchi. I've put those bottles head to head on Kanpai Planet. You can watch that video and find out everything you need to know about the distillery, its history, more information about the aging environments, and lots more. Spoiler alert, I was impressed. And I wasn't the only one, with both whiskies receiving a number of awards since release. Despite this, tipplers may still be more familiar with Sakurao for their gin, which itself continues to gain awards and recognition, and with Togouchi as a brand of whiskey which wasn't as Japanese as the label purported. Well, they've certainly been busy trying to change that. Since the first release cask strength bottles, they've put out a number of single casks and special releases, both here in Japan and overseas. On the 6th of June 2022, they released this Sakurao Sherry Cask Stillman Selection bottle, a blend of peated and non-peated whiskies aged in imported first fill cream sherry casks selected by master distiller Taihei Yamamoto. But our focus today, here in Aloha Whiskey Bar in Tokyo, is on the two other releases from the same day. Their first regular release core range bottlings. The 700ml bottle design and aesthetic are the same as the first release cask strength bottles from 2021. They're bottled at 43% ABV, which for context is the same strength as Suntory's Yamazaki, Hakushu, Hibiki and Chita core ranges. However, compared to those bottles, there's something very special about these. They are non-chill filtered and natural colour. Now that combination is very rare to see, not just in Japan, but anywhere in the whiskeyverse. Non-chill filtration below 46% is rare in Scotch, especially in situations where the whiskey has been diluted down to below that level. And that, for whiskey otaku, is fantastic, something the larger players could learn from. There's no age statement on these bottles, but my sources tell me that they use liquids of 3 years and a little older. Both releases are available domestically in Japan and overseas and will be released in batches, but there's no batch number on the bottles, unlike, for example, Ichiro's Molten Grain, which I've reviewed on Kanpai Planet. In Japan, at the RRP, they each cost 6,600 yen after tax, about $50 US. For context, Yamazaki and Hakushu Distillers Reserve are 4,950 yen after tax. When I put the first release cask strengths head to head, I said, I'm gonna have to call it a draw. So there's everything at stake in this rematch at this lower weight class of 43%. Who will win? Let's find out. Thank you very much for watching. Help us grow the Kanpai Planet community by sharing these videos with all your drinks-loving chums. The main purpose of this head-to-head is to pit that Sakurao and Togouchi 43% against each other. But to give us some context, I've actually pulled out the first release cask strength bottles from 2021. We're going to kick things off with the Sakurao 43%. Now, the first release cask strength Sakurao was 54% ABV. It's been made with both peated and non-peated malted barley, both sourced from overseas. 4 different cask types were used here: bourbon, sherry, and 2 which are undisclosed. I have found out that they have been used in an equal percentage, so 25% of each type of barrel. Checking out the colour, it's a bright, light amber, lighter than the cask strength release, which is more of a classic, deeper amber. On the nose, vanilla, dates, orange, peach, oak. There's also some light peat there. The first release is quite similar, but there's just an extra depth of sweetness and smokiness there. There's also some sandalwood and a red grape note, which isn't in the 43%. However, we're off to a good start. Kanpai. That's nice. I'm enjoying some vanilla, some chocolate, something on the boundary between milk and dark chocolate, and some nuts, some cashews and some walnuts. One thing I'm really loving is this saltiness, which provides a nice structure to the dram. I mean, they are aging this thing in warehouses right by the Seto Inland Sea. There's a tartness there, a bit of sour plum, and a little bit of astringency, and the peat there just sharpening that sweetness. Comparing it to the first release cask strength, there is of course more body from the higher ABV, but there also is more bitterness here, and I actually feel that the 43% is a little bit more integrated in its flavour profile. The finish is the longer side of medium. You've got that smoke and wood at first, but then it leaves, and what remains is a lovely sweetness with a little bitterness and a little saltiness. So, what's the verdict on the Sakurao 43%? It's a lovely classic dram. You've got those 4 barrel types and the peated and non-peated malt bringing together a number of different flavours, and they're all pretty well balanced. I don't think it really loses out too much, even when put against the first release cask strength. I know I'm blaspheming here by not immediately trouncing this compared to its higher ABV brethren, but yes, along with that higher body and increased flavour intensity does also come some increased bitterness and a lack of integration of those flavours, which I actually find to be much more harmonious in the 43%. As a result, it's an easier sipper. And you can put your own value judgment on that statement. Next up, the Togouchi core release 43%, side by side with the first release cask strength 52% bottling. It uses only overseas sourced non-peated malt and has been aged exclusively in first fill bourbon barrels. The colour is this straw pale gold and almost identical to the first release and much lighter than the Sakurao 43%. On the nose. Ooh. This is bringing back the memories. That pine, forest, hiking, freshness is still there, like I remember it from the 52%. There's also vanilla and apple and melon, and this thickness, which just can really only be expressed as marmalade with the cask strength 52%. That pine aroma is enhanced and amplified and much more prevalent, and I'm going to stop saying that in a number of different ways. Kanpai. I'll talk about the mouthfeel first. It's quite creamy, and despite not using any peated malt, it's actually surprisingly oily. That vanilla is there and quite strong, unsurprisingly, given it's all bourbon barrel aged. There's a kick to it as well, that forest freshness on the nose, translating to a bit of bite on the palate. It's a really refreshing sweetness that you get. It's quite unique. Let's see how it compares to the 52%. Right, I think we've got a similar situation to what we had with the Sakurao. The 9% extra ABV here brings with it a little bit more flavour intensity, but at the cost of the refreshment that you get here. The finish takes you back to the nose, those pine forest notes as well, and dare I say it, as I've used that word a lot, it is quite refreshing. But sometimes a word works. The finish is a little shorter than the Sakurao. This Togouchi 43% is one of the most unique drams I've had since I last tried this. So, head to head. First off, I've got to say, I'm reminded just how impactful the maturation environment has been on these two whiskies. And I'd struggle to pin them down at 3 years. I think they're both really great drams. When I reviewed the first release cask strength bottles in detail, I gave it a draw. It was too close to call. This time, I'm going to approach the problem in a different way. If I was exiled to a desert island and I could only take one of these 2 bottles as part of a whiskey collection, I'd want something unique. And that uniqueness is provided by the Togouchi. So, should you buy them? A resounding yes. At the end of many of these videos, I've found myself wrestling with whether to tell you to buy a $120 bottle of 3-year-old Japanese whiskey. So I find it as refreshing as a cold Togouchi mountain stream to be reviewing 2 bottles of real Japanese whiskey at a reasonable democratic price point. If you find them on the shelves at their Japan RRP of 6,600 yen after tax, they are a must buy. And if you can, try them in a bar and put them head to head with each other and those first release cask strength bottles like I did. The first core release from one of Japan's new wave of craft distillers is another great milestone in the history of Japanese whiskey. Until next time, Kanpai.